Game changers, game changers. For episode 2 of At the Desk with Dr. KwA, I am honored to welcome Dr. Christopher Tienken. Dr. Tienken is a nationally and internationally respected scholar, professor, and former district leader whose work challenges some of the most deeply held assumptions in education reform. He currently serves as professor of education, leadership management, and policy at Seton Hall University and as an external faculty member at the University of Catania in Italy. His professional experience spans every level of public education, from elementary classroom teacher to assistant superintendent, giving him a rare and credible practitioner's lens. Dr. Tienken is also a research professor in residence for the American Association of School Administrators, where he leads landmark studies on the superintendency, and he serves on Italy's national agency evaluating university research quality. A prolific author of more than 130 publications and 10 books, his work confronts myths, misuses of data, and policy that undermine scholar centered education. Today's conversation invites us to slow down, think critically, and examine whether the reforms we pursue are actually serving scholars. This conversation, or this is a conversation rather, education leaders need and one we cannot afford to avoid. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Christopher Tienken. Anything for our members to chew on before we get into our Q&A?
Thanks, Doc. I'm honored to be here. I love what you've done with the place. Your studio is looking outstanding. So
Try.
no, it's great to be with you today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. So, somewhat of an opening prompt to get us going. We often hear that schools must change or reform, yet many of the same ideas keep resurfacing. Why do you think education reform tends to recycle itself?
So I'll give you a quick answer, and then I'll expound a little bit. So
Okay.
the one word is money. So let me break that down. Okay, it's not that the same good ideas keep resurfacing. It's that the same bad ideas keep coming back. And I'll give you the example. Since the passage of No Child Left Behind back in 2002, there
hmm
has clearly emerged what Brightman and Gutmore termed as the educational industrial complex. So
Mm,
this complex is built upon for-profit tenets of marketing and consumerism. So when you sat in a chair, you saw it. Companies repackage ideas that
hmm
never work. They give them a new name. They introduce them as the new shiny toy, shiny solution to whatever the corporate marketeers say are the problems, right?
Okay.
So let me give you the most current example: science of reading. So that has spawned a multi-billion-dollar industry of products, but the ideas are the same ones that didn't work during Reading First and No Child Left Behind, during
hmm
the traditional skill and drill approach of the 90s and the cognitive psychology approach of the 1980s. And of course, we all remember the basal reader approach
hmm
of the 70s. There's no difference between the basal reader approach of the 1970s and the science of reading approach today. It's just repackaged dogma and slogans fed back to us in education with the promise of performance. So now, I see where we are now in 2026. I see the public education system is really finding itself as a victim of what Michael Sandel called the commercialization effect. It's the educational industrial complex. It has successfully replaced a public social system of education with a market based system.
Hmm.
Think about it, Doc. We now have a legally mandated market system of education that entrenches what Freire called the banking model of
Mm,
education. I mean, look, you and I both led in those situations, right? In the banking
We
model,
did. We did.
students are viewed as passive receptacles. They're responsible for little more than knowledge acquisition, storage, and regurgitation. Okay. And all of that is determined by outside forces. And then the teachers are in the same position. They're given programs and they're told, just teach it.
Hmm.
Don't ask questions, just teach it. So this whole commercialization effect objectifies students. We label them college and career ready, partially proficient, basic skills, and then we assign them to commercially developed products that haven't been tested to
Mm.
remediate the deficiencies that the commercially developed standardized test that's not tested in research has found, right?
So, with all of that said, how is political pressure shaping all of this? Right? How does political pressure shape all of this? Because
Yeah.
you're seeing the changes, especially under this new administration, where the gutting of even what was considered safe, right, in terms of educational dynamics, are being gutted out and hauled.
Okay, so the whole apparatus, this whole political economic apparatus runs on an economic ideology called neoliberalism. It's an ideology. It's a system of beliefs that operates with the idea that it's the capitalistic free market. And there's nothing wrong with capitalism. I'm a big
Absolutely
proponent
not.
of it, right? It just do does it belong in a socialist system? So it operates under the idea that the free market competition, privatization of social services is the most efficient way to increase economic growth. But as Bourdieu termed it, it's really a program of methodological destruction of the social space of the common
Mm,
good. So,
okay.
so neoliberalism is an economic ideology. It has no morals. It's disguised as efficiency and effectiveness, but the overriding goal is profit. So decisions are based made on economics, not
So
moral.
with that, with that, would you say this is the reason why urgency is often overridden or overrides evidence?
Absolutely. Urgency is just a mirage created by the educational industrial
Okay.
complex to sell products. Like a Common Core Standards was one of the best examples of that. People were crowing about this being a Sputnik moment. The US was falling behind in competitiveness, which wasn't true. Something drastic had to be done, which wasn't true. So all of a
Mm,
sudden, this solution comes out of nowhere, right?
mm.
Just in the nick of time. It hits the scene. And like we discussed, it was just a simple rehash of ideas from 1892 and 1895. No empirical research to back it up. And I traced the entire thing in my article, Common Core Standards, an example of dataless decision making, and also in my book, School Reform Landscape Reloaded.
Hmm. So fascinating, and I love the way you're encapsulating the dynamics that we face within the landscape. So then the question becomes, what problems are we actually trying to solve, and who defines them, right? Because when capitalism is at the root of it, when politics is at the root of it, how do we know what problem we're really trying to solve versus what's being manufactured and who's defining all of those elements?
Sure, I don't think we're trying to solve any problems. I think we're trying to solve symptoms. So, so we
Hmm.
say that we're trying to solve an achievement problem, but as
Okay.
Bronfenbrenner showed us, and Thorndike before him, and many other researchers before Bronfenbrenner, most academic problems themselves are founded upon the ecological system in which the student grows up. Poverty, hunger, mental health, physical health, housing insecurity, limited life experiences, and
Hmm.
all the other adverse childhood experiences that impact achievement on, they impact achievement as much as school. In fact, you can predict standardized test scores, 40% to 75% of the standardized test score can be predicted just by out of school factors. So
Right.
when you say, what problem are we trying to solve? It's really, what problem should we be solving? And that's the problem
And I think that's
of
$1 million
poverty.
question.
That's the problem of
That's
poverty. If you solve poverty, test scores go through the roof.
mm.
You don't have to change anything in schools. Just solve the
So
poverty.
with that, right? So we talk about, in essence, the industrialization of education, right? And we have yet to pivot from that structure, right? So you hear the phrases "meeting scholars where they are" and all of the, but we seldom really met them where they are, right? We still continue to operate within this control element where you funnel them through. They have to take the test. They have to do this, and if they don't meet these metrics, classify this young man, classify that young lady. They're not fit for this. They're not fit. And frankly, if you look at the landscape, your most successful individuals left the system to become successful, right? So your pioneers of tech and all of those areas, they had to step away from just the machine to really be, you know, establish the new form of, or the new frontier, so to speak.
Yes, yeah. Think about it like this. And now I want to be clear, and I've been clear in my writings. I'm not saying students from poverty can't learn. They learn just as much, just as fast. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they start from a place that's much further behind, and they don't have the supports to make full use of the resources. So let's put ourselves in, you and I, let's go way back. Let's jump in a time machine. We're going way back to when we took our driver's test, right? The practical, right?
Ooh,
Now
okay,
think about
okay.
this. Hey, you and I both had driver's ed in high school.
Yes, we did.
Everyone receives the same level of instruction in high school, the driver's ed class. But some students' families, they don't even own a car. Meanwhile,
Mm,
other kids, their parents have already bought them a car. They've been out practicing on the road,
mm,
taking them to practice driving tests, getting a driving coach. Those students pass the driving test at a higher rate than the students who don't have the
you are correct.
resources
You are
to
correct.
support their learning. Okay? So it's not that the kids can't learn. They do. They just don't have the resources to make the most of the access that they get.
You are correct. You are correct. So that leads us into directly into how research and data are often used or misused in reform conversations, right? So with that, how is data commonly misinterpreted in education reform?
I think in a lot of ways, some educators and certainly policymakers just rest on these standardized tests. And we
Mm-hmm.
have to, and the research, it's been clear for 100 years. The tests aren't measuring learning as much as they are measuring background knowledge and life experience.
Right.
Okay. So if you're only using results from standardized tests, you're going to continually make the wrong decision about the problem. In fact, you're never going to find the problem. You're only going to find symptoms. So you just continually spin your wheels trying to deal with symptoms as opposed to really addressing the problems.
And so when you talk about, we have to put ETS on the radar, right? Because they develop these
Well, all of
assessments
them.
and,
Yeah,
and on
all of
all of
them.
them actually. But with that, when you talk about life experiences, right? You just gave a scenario where the kid whose parents do not own a vehicle, yet they still have to take a driver's ed class. They don't get to practice. They don't get to sit behind the wheel and go. So that disparity right there is a huge component that impacts the field, right? And how scholars are judged on their true acumen, right? Because I don't have access, you may have access, but when we're expected to perform equally when we sit down for this assessment, right? So, what are some of the most persistent myths your research pushes back against in this area?
So I think one of the most persistent ones that has been the most destructive to public education, the most harmful to
Mm-hmm.
children, is that standardized tests are objective.
Hmm.
Okay, because as you know, colleagues and I at Seton Hall, we have been predicting standardized test scores at the state and national level in
Yes.
New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Ohio. Uh, Colleagues have done it in Michigan, other states. These tests are predictable, and they're
Mm-hmm.
predictable because they're not measuring learning. They're measuring background knowledge, and background knowledge, it's the understandings that kids have about the world that they bring to school. Background knowledge
Mm-hmm.
comes from money. So we're able to predict standardized test scores just by looking at demographic economic data in communities, knowing nothing about schools. A colleague of ours, Jamil Marone, and I published in 2024 another study, The Pernicious Predictability of State Test Scores, where we looked at high school Algebra 1 test scores. We predicted them for
Mm-hmm.
75% of the high schools in New Jersey accurately, knowing nothing about the schools, just background, just factors that affect background knowledge.
So this we could go so many different ways here, right? So my the thought that comes to mind is, why do simple solutions gain traction despite weak evidence?
I
Because
think
that's what's at play here.
I think the key word in your question is because they're simple, right? It's the human nature path of least resistance.
Okay.
Simple solutions to complex problems never work, but people like to implement them because they're simple. They're politically expedient, right? It's easy for someone to
Okay.
say, we're going to do something, and what we're going to test this way, or we're going to retain students in third grade, or we're going to do this. Those solutions have been dead end losers, right? For a
And we've
hundred
seen it.
years, right? You and I have lived it. We've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't work, but because they're simple, they are they are attractive. I think real leaders, okay, real leaders have to fight that tendency to look for the simple solution, and they really need to dig below the surface and truly understand what the problem is, and put in the time and effort to address the problem, and not look for the easy way out.
So on with that stated, right? What would you advise school educators and leaders to be asking when presented with data driven reforms? What should they be asking?
Yeah, well, first of
What's
all,
the $1 million question?
if it's a data-driven reform, I say, show me the data. Okay. So first, are there
Uh-huh.
actual, and this is what I did with the Common Core, completely took it apart. Are there actual data that
Hmm.
support the reform? Okay. And do the are the students where those data came from like my
Hmm.
students? Because most programs that are given to us, they're not research. The programs you're buying, all those shiny new toys,
Yes, the toys.
those technology-based toys that are bankrupting school finances.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know the ones, hey, go on this program every day for 20 minutes, and those are not actually research based. The ones that do have some research many times do it in-house. It's called hot housing. And then
Mm-hmm.
others that have data, they may have data, but when you look at the demographics of the kids
Right.
where those data come from, they're not the kids that we're working
We right.
with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's
Okay.
where the disconnect comes in as well, right? Because You've tested this with a specific cohort of scholars, yet you're broadening it for a cohort that has not had those same lived experiences as those that you did your actual testing with.
Right. And we know that term, you and I know that term is overgeneralization.
Big
Okay,
time.
you're
Big time.
overgeneralizing here,
Big
right?
time. Big time. So then here's the other the question, I guess, another question that comes to mind. If many reform narratives are flawed, then the next question becomes what actually works?
The good news is, right? We have the good news is we have over uh, about 150 years of real evidence, of real data about what works. And I'm gonna really oversimplify it here, okay? But I'm gonna boil it down to four things.
Okay.
And it's not that I'm boiling it down. Uh, uh, two very renowned curriculum researchers, Daniel and Laurel Tanner, spent decades researching this, and they came up with something called the curriculum paradigm. And the curriculum paradigm is
Mm-hmm.
basically like a compass. It's not a recipe. Okay, this is, leadership is not paint by numbers. We don't need recipes, right? We need research-based paradigms to guide us, and then we develop the
Mm-hmm.
solutions based on the research. So the curriculum paradigm, it says, look, you got to pay attention to four things when you're dealing with the education of children. Number one, we want programs and instruction that treat students as active constructors of meaning who
Mm-hmm.
bring life experience to the classroom. Second, we want to organize the curriculum and instruction to connect the content to the kid, connect the content to that life experience, use the
Right.
life experience to propel and connect the student to this static uh,
Mm-hmm.
content. We got to do that in a way that recognizes differences in human development. That's
Absolutely.
pillar number three, right? So that's why we use a lot of things like differentiated instruction. We should be using curriculum-based assessments, testing kids on
Mm-hmm.
what's actually taught.
Being taught.
And the final thing is we got to pay attention to social forces. So use the things that are out in the world, the issues that are happening in the world, to take this static, boring content, make it come alive. So that's why we want to
Mm-hmm.
do problem-based, activity-based, scenario-based activities with students based on the issues that they're aware of and that they're facing. So then you end up with an activity-based curriculum that respects the child, has high expectations because you can do that with any standards that you are given, but it's implemented in a
Right.
developmentally appropriate way. So you worry about those four things, and those four things have been shown to work for the past 150 years. The issue is those four things, you really don't need to sell a lot of products to do that,
And
right?
so
All
we,
you
we just got
need,
back to the crux of the problem, right?
right? All you really need is to upskill your teachers, so
Right.
we want to raise the capacity of the teacher through professional development. We've almost completely de-skilled the teaching force by turning them into proxies for technology companies. All we do is tell them, hey, put the student on this, put the student on this. We need to reinvest in our teachers, not programs. A good teacher can teach regardless of the
Absolutely.
program.
Yep. Yep. And so, wow. But it's all about capitalism, right?
But nobody's
Because
making
is it
money
is
if there's no problems.
right. And you talk about me, based on the four elements that you presented from Tana and Tana, that will take away a lot of money out of a lot of people's pockets.
So,
All right, so
Doc,
let's
one of
let's
the
get to some constructive leadership on this front. Why does high quality scholar centered curriculum actually what rather does high quality scholar centered curriculum actually look like? And I think you've kind of touched on that with those four elements that you presented. Anything else that you want to add to that will help
Yeah, no, I think
our
I think
listeners
do
and the audience?
I think Dewey summed it up in terms of that curriculum paradigm. Dewey really summed it up, and it's basically, if you can just remember one thing, give students something to do, not something to memorize. So we got to go beyond memorization. Memorization is part of it, but we got to move quickly away to the application, synthesis, innovation.
Right, right. Because memorization can be lost, right? but the experience lasts a lot longer.
That's
It
right,
lasts a
Doc.
lot longer. So in that with that as a basis, how should assessment inform learning rather than control it? Because right now I think is the other way around, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you are not mistaken. Right now, assessment controls the learning. If
Mm-hmm.
if we want assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. So in that way, we have to go back to curriculum-based assessments, assessing what's actually taught
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom. Standardized assessments don't do that very well by their very nature because they are standardized. Okay. And trying to be objective, they become completely subjective. So we got to get back to classroom-based assessments. We got to
Assessments.
get back to trusting teachers. We got to get back to investing in teachers, professional development, job embedded
Mm-hmm.
professional development. I don't care what standards you throw at me and pile on top of me. If I know how to teach, I know how to do that in a way where I give students something to do, not just memorize.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when we talk about assessments controlling learning, what mistakes do systems make when standardization replaces professional judgment? Right?
W-
Because right now teachers don't know what to do. They are clueless, even though they have scholars in front of them. Right? This is not me saying it. This is just the way the structure currently has it. That put the kid on this application. You don't need to do anything, but being in front of scholars and seeing scholars in front of me, I can tell that Kwame can benefit from X, Y, and Z if I will work with him on that specifically. But my day is structured in a way where I have to put Kwame on this program for 30 minutes, or that becomes part of my write up, right? So,
Yeah, no, you're hitting it on the head, and it's not that I think they're clueless. I think we're flying blind because we are in we are buried in data, but it's the wrong data. And then, like you said, we have no time to teach.
mm-mm.
We have no time to teach. So I think when systems allow standardization to replace professional judgment, you're flying a plane in the fog with no instrumentation, and you're just kind of
Mm.
reacting to the turbulence. You are not in control.
So the fascinating thing for me is that this has been at play for decades upon decades. What is it going to take for that pivot to occur?
So I think, look, at the federal policy level, I'm not sure there's the will or the skill, okay, on the part of the majority of policymakers to actually listen and and look at the data. But I don't,
Mm-hmm.
what I tell leaders is don't concern yourself with things you can't control. You control an
Facts.
awful lot at the local level. You control how all of this stuff rains down and hits educators and students. And if you think about that curriculum paradigm, you control those four things. Okay.
Right?
You can repackage the curriculum standards. You can influence and change instruction.
But
Okay.
doesn't that require leadership above, so as a building admin, right? These are the things I want to do. It's critically important that my superintendent recognizes and understands that that's a that's the better benefit for our scholars
Yeah.
versus the the latest toys and the latest trend, the latest whatever is at play. I also think that's an area that gets a little murky because if you don't have a leader who understands what you're trying to do and will fully invest and support you in that arena, it creates conflict, it creates challenges, it makes it difficult to get to where we need to pivot to.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's there's no shortage of ignorance. Ignorance is seems to be highly contagious. However, if you're a leader at the local level, I wrote a book, and part of that book was about creative compliance. Okay,
Mm,
so there's strategies that leaders can use to do the right thing.
right.
Okay, but you don't have to engage in professional suicide. I always say, look, you need to live to lead another day, but there's
No doubt.
strategies you
I
can
like
use.
that.
There's strategies that you can use to do that. And those strategies are creative compliance strategies. So if you're working for a superintendent who doesn't understand the research, may not want to understand the research, looks for the simple solutions to complex problems, you
Hmm.
just have to pivot and understand what you're dealing with and take care of business as best you can using creative
Hmm.
compliance strategies at the local level. Again, there's still a lot you can do with your teachers in terms of
Absolutely.
upskilling them and teaching them how to make the curriculum come alive for kids.
So then we're talking job embedded professional development, trusting the expertise of the practitioners on the ground, right? And so as we walk away from this segment here, the key takeaway I think is the fact that good curriculum is not about compliance, it's about coherence.
I think you hit it on the head. If we're if as a leader your goal is to be compliant, I would say please resign and go do something else. That is not your goal.
No, not at all.
Compliance never leads to excellence.
Well stated. Well stated.
Compliance leads to conformity. We don't need conformity. We need creativity, innovate and innovation.
And this by all means, of course, places a great deal of responsibility on leadership, especially superintendents and district leaders, as we go forward. So with that, right, let's talk about some leadership policy and superintendency dynamics that I think you've been in the arena of. I have to admit to our audience, I was a former scholar of his during my doctoral program at Seton Hall, so that's our primary connect. But what do your superintendent's studies reveal about the realities of district leadership today?
Sure. No, as you mentioned, I'm the American Association of School Administrators, AASA. I am their professor in residency. So I'm lucky. I get to do some national studies
Mm-hmm.
on the superintendency. We just did a big one, 2025 mid-decade update of the superintendency. One of the things that we looked at there are the evolving roles of the
Mm.
superintendent, right? Years ago at a certain time period, the superintendent was considered the instructional leader. And then they were considered the kind of like the statesperson of the district.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're considered the business manager, those kinds of things. Right now, what we've seen this evolution in the superintendency where they really under a lot of pressure to run the financial side of things,
Mm-hmm.
and the instructional side has taken a back seat in the role of the superintendent. And
Hmm.
look, I understand that when you look at all the financial hits that we have been taking since the great financial crisis, 2007, 2008, we're now, what is
Eight.
that?
Right.
We're now in 18 years of
Wow.
funding,
That eight.
right, funding crises after crises. Okay, so
Right.
superintendents are doing what they have to do. They're addressing the shark closest to the boat. If you don't have money,
Can't
what
get much done.
can't get much done, right? So their lives are consumed by running the financials, trying to keep the lights on, trying to keep programs going.
And playing nice in the political sandbox.
Well, yeah, and that's the other side. Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen in the past 10 years, the political attacks on public education But that's coming from the neoliberal side of things that's trying to privatize, make money off of public education. So these superintendents they're fighting a democratic battle against people who want to privatize, take away democratic public education system, and they're taking it away through starving the finances. So, I mean, it's no wonder why superintendents are less involved in the instructional side of things, because they are working to save the democratic, free public education system.
So, wow, that's loaded. So in light of that, right? How can leaders resist harmful reform pressures while still remaining accountable? Right? Because there's a balance in that.
Put children first. Every decision that you make should come from the point of view of putting children first. If you do that, you will make better decisions consistently over time and help more children to be successful.
Okay. Put scholars first. Now, then we used to have that as our trending mantra eons ago. Children first.
I'm sure. I'm sure some kind of corporate education company used it as their motto. But I want to go beyond mottos, right? I want to go to actions. So it's not just a
There lies the
motto,
difference.
right? It's not just a motto, but the actions have to make that motto a reality. So it's not aspirations. We got to move from aspirational to operational. That's where the leadership comes in.
Okay. Okay. So, in light with that stated, what policy decisions tend to have the most unintended consequences?
Wow. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
With a lot of gold, right?
A lot of good intentions out there. I even think because I know some of these policymakers, and some
Mm-hmm.
of them, even with the mass standardization, their hearts, they're trying to do the right thing, right? So I think when we try to kind of plant the flag of high expectations
Mm-hmm.
and we make policies that we hope will hold high expectations for all students, but we make them in a way that actually standardizes how we get there. I think the unintended consequences of standardizing the process is really
Okay.
where we go off the rails.
And I think, and because that puts us right back in line with what's already there, right? The default,
The,
almost what
the
the
default,
default is.
the
So,
default.
in light of with that, what leadership behaviors sustain improvements over time? What would you say? What leadership behaviors would you say sustains improvement over time?
So I think the behavior of being reflective, okay.
Okay.
I think the behavior of being informed, and that means, look, yeah, you have to stay up on the research, not the magazine articles. Okay, you look at the
The
magazine
deep
articles.
dives.
Yep, you look at the magazine articles to let you know where you need to start taking the deep dives, right? And you don't have to
Okay.
do this. You don't have to do this on your own. I think another successful leadership behavior is the behavior of networking, right? So you got to network with people who know what you don't know, understand what you don't understand. Use the principle from Bowman and Deal of complementary associations. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a tall order to ask administrators, school leaders, superintendents to know all the research. Just network with people who know what you don't know.
But you know what's fascinating with that statement, though? I think the challenge of networking becomes a lift in and of itself, right? Because most of the work that we do, we find ourselves in isolation, right? Trying to battle an uphill or have an uphill battle against a system that leaves very little room for us to say, "Hey, listen, let me call Chris and find out, what his thoughts are on X, right? Because everybody in their own arena is dealing with the politics and the this and the that, right? So it makes it so challenging to get this network apparatus running in a way that will help leaders maintain sustainability over a period of time. If I'm seeing it correctly.
You are, and then the other thing piled on top of that is something you brought up earlier, this idea of urgency. I think sometimes we get caught up and we make things urgent that aren't urgent.
Hmm.
Change,
Okay.
change takes time. Okay.
Absolutely.
If you're looking for a quick fix, you're going down the wrong road. And there may not be the sense of urgency that everybody is telling you there is. There may be this false sense of urgency to eventually sell you something. Okay. So,
But
you know,
but
so
isn't that the repetitive
yes.
dynamic in
Yep.
our field, right? New leadership comes in, they take over, and we have a sense of urgency based on this data and sustainability of even programs that might have a fighting chance of helping change the narrative of a school, of a scholar, of an
Right.
institution. We don't even allow that time
Right.
to see if it actually works. We try year one, we'll put all the money in it. Year two, we don't really do a good job of looking at the results to see if it's gaining traction. By year three, that money's allotted to some other thing, right? And
Yeah,
so
we're
that
on
is
to
so
something new. We're using this program for 3 years, and then no, now we're using this one. Now, but wait a minute, you said that one was the good one. No, that didn't
right.
work.
Yeah,
And think about from a teacher's perspective. You're in a classroom 20 years, and it's just like here we go again.
and you hear that, and they will tell you, we did this when I was back in such and such a year. Those
Yeah,
folks who've been
it
there
used
for
to be
30, 40
called.
years, right? We
Yeah, we
called it
used to
X
call
and
it
we called it
this.
Y. Amazing, amazing. So as we close on this segment, let's bring this back to the educators and leaders listening, right? Uh, some of my final questions that I want to kind of get your insights on. What is one belief about reform leaders should be willing to unlearn?
Um, so you know, I look the way I define reform is that you're going to change the system. And so I think you need to unlearn that you need to completely change and disrupt the system. I think we need to be
Okay,
focused more on improvement because we have a system that actually works if you let it work. If you don't willingly try to destroy it, we have a system that has really propelled us as a nation uh, to the top of the world. So I think you need to unlearn that every reform is necessary because it's not.
okay, okay. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. And so, if schools focus on fewer things but did them well, what should those things be?
I come back to the curriculum paradigm. Treat kids as active constructors of meaning, give them something to do, not just memorize. Take into account that kids are at different places cognitively, social, emotionally, and differentiate things. We can still have the same standard for all kids, but the way they get there has to be different.
And so, I think some of the work you and I have done in that arena is trying to prep practitioners on how to effectively diversify the instructional presentation so that it meets scholars where they are. Before I let our audience, before we part from our audience, and before I give you our closing, get your closing thoughts, can we talk a little bit more about that piece, right? That classroom dynamic where differentiation is paramount. And one of the things I've learned in the work that we've done, I'm realizing that teacher training programs are not equipping practitioners with what they need in that dynamic to be able to step into an environment and be effective in delivering instruction in a way that meets scholars where they are. Can you speak a little bit more about that piece? Because I
Yeah.
think that's at the when we talk about the four elements of the Tana, and we're talking about what really would drive growth and all the elements that comes with scholars being met where they are. These
Sure.
differentiation.
Yeah. No, look, I think, obviously I work at a university. I talk to my teacher prep colleagues, and one thing that they'll tell me is, there's so little room in the curriculum. The curriculum is standardized from the state, okay, in
Mm,
terms of what they have to teach. There's so little room in the curriculum for them to even deal with a lot of these issues. So at that point, we need to look at the leadership, and we need to say, okay, we have to have our own comprehensive induction programs at the local level. So the first
hmm
4 years that a teacher is in a district, there needs to be a specialized 4-year teacher induction pathway that we socialize our teachers in terms of the way we want teaching done here. And so that's where I
Okay.
think you begin to customize the teachers at the local level. And that's another way that a very strategic principle, okay,
hmm
can help take the edge off a lot of this neoliberalism, a lot of this corporatization, commercialization,
Okay.
educational industrial complex. The principal can do that by running his or her own teacher induction program and
Okay.
equip his or her teachers with the skills that they need in that school, not some imaginary
Absolutely.
school where kids
Right.
don't
Right.
have any
Right. Right. Right.
problems, but our school.
Right.
uh, so I would say, you take control of that as a principal, and you support your teachers however you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before I let you go, what would happen if evidence, not ideology, led our decisions?
So I think you would see education policy that is based on effectiveness, not efficiency and profit. I think you would see a lot less crisis management
hmm
mentality. I think you would see just a focus on effectiveness and upskilling teachers, building capacity of teachers. I think you'd see a lot more resources for students in poverty. You'd
hmm
probably see a school system based on the community schools model, where schools that are servicing students from poverty would have a doctor there, a dentist there. They would have low-cost prescription policies. They would have childcare. They would have maternity care. You would have a social system that most other democratic countries have, basically,
hmm
and
Right.
we would
Right.
have that. We would have that at the local level.
That would be sweet. That would be real sweet. Because I think that's how you balance and close the gap as well. Right? Balance and close the gap. Dr. Christopher Tienken, thank you so much for joining us and being part of the conversation at the desk. Any parting words for school leaders who are currently in this chaos that is the educational landscape?
Doc, my parting words are these. Public education, as Dewey said, John Dewey, is the incubator of democracy.
Mm,
So I have a lot of respect for leaders who are in the chair today, because they're not only tasked with educating and really caring for and nurturing the 56 million children that attend public school in the United States. They are
mm,
also a linchpin of democracy. And I think the evidence is clear right now that we need the public education system more than ever. So I just want leaders to be inspired by the work they are doing and understand the importance of what they're doing on a daily basis. Keeping a public education system alive and helping it to hopefully thrive again in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom, your insights, and the work that you do. Game changers. I thank you for joining us and being part of this conversation. It is my hope that you're walking away more informed, better position to make informed decisions for your scholars, especially those of you who are leaders, those of you who are in the classroom. My hope is that you heard what was said in terms of making sure that your practice is meeting scholars where they are. I thank you all for being with us. Dr. Tienken, appreciate you being here and taking the time to take a seat at the desk. And so, folks, be well. Take care. Remember, this is the podcast where transformation begins with conversation. And I hope this conversation opens your world a little bit more. Be well. Doc, thank you very much. Take care.